Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you on this lovely Saturday. Day late. I apologize for the delay. Normally, yes, I would have done the show Friday. However, I had an engagement that I had to attend to yesterday, so I was unable to do the show at noon. And I figured, well, I'll just go ahead and just delay it a whole other day and give a chance to give a Saturday tryout. Maybe this will be something I continue on in the future. Maybe throwing in a Saturday show from time to time. So wanted to give this a little test run and see how it goes. So once again, I apologize for the delay in this episode, but it was unfortunate but it needed to be done. Okay, so today's show, kind of a big show here, and a lot of content. So I probably won't be able to get through everything that I would like to talk about today in a half an hour. So this might be a topic that I revisit down the line in the future. Um, Nevertheless, I think it's a really cool topic, and it's one that most of us um, are at least somewhat familiar with, at least the concept of it. And that's, are we living in a computer simulation? Are we living in some sort of a simulated reality? Of course, for those of you who have seen the Matrix movies, you sort of have an idea of how that might look, or at least one interpretation of how that might look. Certainly the concepts and the ideas behind it, anyways. Nevertheless, that's going to be the topic for today's show. A few things I wanted to touch base with before getting into the deep into the content. Um, just want to remind everybody, if in terms of the best place to find information about the show and things that are going on with the show and topics and things that I'm working on, stuff like that. I try to post that on the Facebook pages, all the social media, the Twitter, Google Plus. So if you haven't already liked it on Facebook or follow on Twitter or put it in one of your circles in Google Plus, go ahead and do that. That's usually where I try to update most of the content as much as possible. I do have a website for the show. So for those of you who might prefer to find stuff about the show that way, um, I'll give you the address here. It's webofconspiracy.wix.com /web of conspiracy. Um, so that's, and from that site, not only can you, listen and you can find the links for the social media and things like that, but you can also listen directly to the show from that web page. Even right now, you can go right to that website and stream it live as I'm talking. So for those of you who maybe don't want to download the Spreaker app or don't want to download it from iTunes later, if you prefer to listen to it live and just want a different way, that's another option for everybody. um, I've I'm rolling out some things on that site, and I haven't really been able to keep up much on it lately. The past couple of weeks have been a little busy, but I'm planning on expanding and doing some more things with the website, and I hope to make that an option that everyone can go to and refer to for more information about the show, upcoming topics, things of that nature. Um, so that's my best advice to everybody who are looking for information there. Also, I know a few of you have sent me messages on Facebook as well as sent me emails. I'm trying to get back in touch with everybody. I've still got a couple people I haven't gotten back in touch with. Um, so by all means, if I haven't gotten to you yet, that doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. I will get to you. Uh, As I said, I've been fairly busy the last couple of weeks in particular, and just trying to get caught up and as well as continuing to move forward with things for the show. So if you've emailed me, hang in there. I will get back with you. Um, so just give me a little bit more time. Hopefully by, I would hope, maybe a week from now, I can at least get back in touch with everybody who sent me emails. So bear with me. Um, I also am trying to perfect and work on particular strategies with regards to being able to make this a little more guest friendly show where I can start incorporating and having some guests on. I've got a few things I'm working on there, although it's probably not anything in the quite near future, but maybe another month or two down the line. So that's something to look forward to. Also, some other upcoming show ideas. I've got a couple of interesting ones planned, I think, here for around the holiday season. Um, so I'll kind of get into a little bit of that with you here, probably in the next week or so, with some of the different show ideas I'm going to have in the upcoming weeks. Okay, so now one particular news item, and I usually try to touch on some of the news items at least every now and again. One particular news item this week that has gotten a lot of attention, and rightfully so, has been the revelation that the NSA is tracking cell phone locations worldwide, at least according to documents that were leaked by Edward Snowden once again. Uh, the ramifications, the reach of what he's done is rather impressive. I mean, the information that we're finding, just in regards to just how much of a big brother state that we live in the United States, um, is crazy, and it's a little bothersome to be sure. Um, but according to these records, we're looking at about 5 billion records a day are kept about cell phone locations around the world. Um, that's and then of course it's stored in this vast database, and I think it's the one, at least one that they're working on out in Utah. Um, it's tremendous to think of the kind of scope and reach of which that um, the government is now just monitoring every little thing that we do. So I don't even, for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, you know how I feel about this. This is nothing new. I've been spending months, on the old program and now on these programs as well, that the government is just so far reaching and has such a, a handle on what it is that we do, what it is that we are communicating about, what it is that we are 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 actively thinking about anymore. They're watching what we do from satellite drones. It is amazing that we live in this kind of world that 50, 60 years ago was considered a work of fiction. It was considered a work of science fiction. This was not what reality was ever going to be, and yet here we are, living in a very controlled state in many respects. Um, Very bothersome, very worrisome. For those of you in the United States, uh, I I would strongly urge you to get your voice out there. And look, I'm not saying that writing your congressman and writing your representatives is going to create any kind of real answer. It might not, but we have to, in order to create change, we have to do something. We have to start moving. Being stagnant, not doing anything, not talking about it, not creating any kind of effort to impart knowledge to others, to express opinions, to open lines of communication. Without doing this, there will be absolutely no hope for any kind of true change in the direction of where this country is going. For those of you who listen to me overseas, and I know that I've got, and I have to be honest, I'm proud of the number of listeners that I have in the UK and Germany, Australia, New Zealand. Um, it's awesome. I didn't ever expect to have the kind of reach that my show has had. Um, so I have to say that for those of you in these other nations, um, I'm not going to say that I know everything about your governments and what your governments are doing, but something tells me that most of your governments are probably doing very similar types of activities and are engaging in very similar types of methods and are monitoring the very same type of things. And yes, while some of it is imparted with this idea of preventing terrorism, stopping terrorism, in the same respect, we're giving up a great deal of individual freedom and liberty that our ancestors fought in many cases for valiantly to try to gain for us in the nations that we live in. It is not doing a service to those who came before by just completely abandoning that freedom. It is our responsibility to continue to fight for it. And I'm not saying that that means going out and starting revolution, engaging any kind of warfare. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. Um, and in some cases, perhaps that might be necessary. But what I'm saying is that we have to use the methods that are available to us in a way to make effective change. And that's not easy, but we have to start somewhere. And by starting, that's the key. Starting and growing and maintaining. Eventually, we can get the attention and we can start putting people in power who have a true respect for individuals and understand why this is a threat. So, at any rate, once again, Edward Snowden has really sort of changed the landscape for many Americans and has kind of changed the way that we view our government, I think, for many. So, um, while many don't agree with his methods, he certainly has driven a point home, so to speak. So, okay, today's show. I've got about 20 minutes or so left here, and there's no way I'm going to be able to cover all this in 20 minutes. So this may make a repeat appearance coming up soon. Are we living in a simulation? Now, this is something that's not entirely a new idea, right? Um, but and certainly the Matrix movies, as I had said earlier, really popularized this idea that perhaps the reality that we are perceiving really isn't real. We're accepting in our brains that what we are perceiving is true, that this is the actual world that we live in. But what if, because this is the only thing that we understand or we remember that we know, what if this isn't a true reality? What if this is a created reality for us to go through whatever motions it is that we're being sent to go through? And when I say it like that, it does imply that there is some sort of intelligent design. I mean, that's sort of one of the fundamental ideas about the idea that we're living in a simulated reality, is that someone had to have created this simulated reality. And there's a number of different theories that if, in fact, we are living in a simulated reality, who is the creator of the reality? Well, one theory, for those who are religious, the idea that God is a programmer, that perhaps God is a highly intelligent computer programmer, and that everything that we're living in is a computer program generated by God or deities or whatever the particular religious belief may be. So the idea that there is this intelligent creator that, in particular, if you look at the Old Testament for Christians, and you look at the idea that heaven and earth was all created, the earth was created in 7 days, the seventh day being rest, but this idea that perhaps all of this was just some sort of computer program, and that we were brought into this reality from something else, and that this is a simulation that we're running. Or perhaps, as some other people suggest, that the simulation has been created by more advanced human beings from the future, or the idea that there's these advanced human beings that are running this simulation and that we're living in this. Another possible theory that some people have discussed: what if the simulators, the creator of the simulation, is extraterrestrial? Uh, and that's one interesting theory as well. When we look at the phenomena that I often discuss on the show, ghosts, the afterlife, extraterrestrials, um, you begin to wonder, well, okay, perhaps the simulation was created and these ideas were thrown in there because this is what our creator wants us to have knowledge of their existence. That's why we see these extraterrestrials and these weird phenomenon. Um, Other people suggest that one of the reasons why we live in a simulation is that, well, there's some actual visible flaws, uh, such as in the movie The Matrix, and I know I've gone back to that now several times, the example of deja vu, that we're living this experience again because it's actually a glitch in the program, that there's a bug in what was being run, sort of like a scratch in the CD and it skips and it goes over again. That there's the same sort of idea that there's some kind of bug and glitch in the program. And every now and again we get these bugs and we don't recognize that that's actually what it is that there's in fact a computer glitch, that there's some sort of glitch in what is happening. So it's a remarkable idea to think about, okay, well, maybe that's what's happening in some of these strange and abnormal phenomena. Maybe it's just a glitch. Another strong theory, at least for those who believe that this is a possibility, is the idea that the math makes up life, that everything can be boiled down in mathematical terms. Mapping the human genome was done with with a computer. We didn't do that without the aid of computer technology. Um, Without that, we wouldn't have known what it is. We wouldn't have been able to decipher as much as we have. So you begin to wonder, okay, maybe. Then there's the idea of just how peculiar it is that life formed where it did. We had to have just the right conditions. Everything had to be just the right way. We had to have just the perfect distance from the sun, the right amount of gravity, the right amount of atmospheric composition. Everything had to be just perfect. The idea of the Goldilocks zone that many astronomers discuss. That these things couldn't have just happened so randomly, that this was created in a simulation, much harkening back to the idea of an intelligent design. Then another concept that I've talked about, at least certainly in my previous show, and I'm considering doing another show on here in the future, the idea of parallel universes, this multiverse, that perhaps we live in several different universes, but each one is a simulation, um, and that each simulation has a different set of rules to it. So there's a number of absolutely amazing ways to think about this being a possibility. This is just all a simulation that we live in. Um, the idea that there perhaps some sort of intelligent design, that there's whoever it may be is beyond is behind all of this. And for those who really get into this theory, they also talk about, well, perhaps, you know, the computer programming necessary, the computer power necessary to run this entire universe as we perceive it would be more power than what's in the universe. So, with that being the case, the only way that this could run as a simulation is if many of the people that we actually see aren't really real, but they're fake. They're generated images. The people that we pass in the street that we never say a word to, that we never see, that we never communicate with, they have no actual reality at all. Nothing. Not even what we actually perceive. That perhaps the actual true reality, the number of people who truly live here, is significantly smaller than what it actually is. And that starts opening up a whole other can of worms, but it's literally jumping down the rabbit hole here. It's You can go into so many different directions with this idea that maybe there's not as many of us as we think there are. Perhaps we're far fewer. And perhaps the fake people that are out there are the reasons why things are stagnant in many ways and things don't change the way that many of us would like them to. It's hard to determine. It's sort of the idea of, for those who are really big into video games and gamers like that, it's the idea of an open world video game where you see these other characters in this game, but they are meaningless unless you interact with them. They really don't serve a purpose other than to fill in the background. Perhaps there are people that we think are real, but truly aren't, because we've never had any interaction. But in that moment that we have interaction, well, now at that point, the idea is if we have interaction, then they're most likely then themselves in the simulation with us as well, because we're interacting with them. It would require a greater deal of programming than would be necessary, than one would be capable of doing to be able. So at that point, we're talking about beings that are in the simulation with us if they're interacting with us. So if we interact, Perhaps the people that we say hi to in the street and they ignore us completely. They don't look at us. Maybe they're not just being rude. Uh, Maybe they're just not real. So that's an interesting thought. And myself personally, when looking through some of this and thinking about some of this, it's like, maybe it's possible. Maybe it's true. Now, some refer to simulation uh, as what they call the lattice, so to speak, that it's this computer generated network of things that everything is sort of connected together. Um, and as I said, for those of you who, and so much of this idea there's a lot of analogies to video games and computer games, to be certain. For those of you who've heard of the games, The Sims, it's a prime example that many people who talk about this idea of living in a simulation often refer to. We've created a game where there are beings that live normal, sort of normal, regular daily lives. They have relationships, they build homes, they have jobs, they do things that we would typically do in our own lives. And we run these characters through this simulation for our entertainment. So the idea that perhaps this is being done on a bigger scale, perhaps we are being run on a simulation for someone else's entertainment or for some other purpose that we don't understand. What if we're a simulation inside a simulation? What if the Sims game, it would be as if though creating the Sims game and allowing them to create a game to create a simulation. We could have simulations inside of simulations inside of simulations and not really even understand that it's happening, not have a true idea that this is what's going on. It begins to, you start thinking this too much once in a while, my head's spinning because what if this is happening? For those who are religious, what if God has created this simulation and for reasons either for his or her entertainment or whatever the case may be, whatever the reasons behind it, but we're running through this simulation for this creator to serve whatever the purposes of this creator is. We just don't understand it. Perhaps when we die, it's the end of the simulation for us. For those who believe in an afterlife, that we die and there's something of us moves on, perhaps that is the true reality, right? It's no different than Neo and the Matrix deciding between taking the red pill and the blue pill, right? Choosing to stay in the Matrix and live that belief, or choosing to gain the knowledge of what is actually going on. Perhaps when we die, we receive that knowledge. We become aware of what is real. What if this is in fact truly just a simulation and none of what actually happens here is real at all, but some sort of teaching tool or learning simulation or entertainment for some other sentient being? Perhaps we are being put through this simulation by extraterrestrial beings. That's a scary kind of thought as well. What if that's the case? What if none of this is real? And this is all a simulation. We believe ourselves to be real, but we're not actually real at all. And that when the simulation ends, this just ends. And there's nothing beyond that. And for those who are, atheists, certainly that would seem to be a possibility, or at least for those who believe that there's nothing beyond, there's no sort of afterlife. Perhaps this is just a simulation by an intelligent being, either a human or an extraterrestrial that is far advanced from our abilities, and we've just been created for someone's entertainment. We're like a huge reality TV show. Um, so perhaps that's the case. Either way, it's daunting to think of ourselves in this respect for many people. Um, Interestingly enough, from what I have managed to find, that scientists, and this has sort of become fairly popular the last few weeks. It's sort of made its rounds on the internet and things of that nature. But there's discussion that there's a test that could actually tell whether or not we live in a simulation. That perhaps programmers can run this test that can determine whether or not this is actually a simulation. And then at that point, the question becomes, do we really want to run this test? If we are just simulations from some intelligent being, and that's all we are, and there's nothing beyond this, do we really want to know this? Do we want to live with this knowledge? For some people, I think the question would be, yes, we want to know this. And why would that be the case? Well, because if this is just a simulation and none of this is real, then there are no ramifications for anything that we do in our lives because none of it is real and none of it matters, right? I mean, if this is just a simulation and we find out it's just a simulation, then there's no need for us to hold to any of the steadfast rules that we've created in this reality of ours. It's all worthless. Other than to maintain a sense of order, it's not necessary. But once we know this, will we be able to maintain the order? Once we realize that this isn't real at all? Very interesting question. There are those who would say that they don't want to know. They don't want the reality of it. If in fact this is just a simulation, that they don't want the truth, that they'd rather not know, that they don't want this cosmic ray test to determine the amount of radiation to get an idea of whether or not it's complicated and far beyond my pay scale. So bear with me in trying to explain this kind of a test. But this idea that perhaps that we're just this entertainment, do for those who don't want to know, they don't want to know that many people are uncomfortable with the idea of thinking that their life may not be worthwhile at all, right? And I think I tend to find myself as one of them. I would prefer to know that, okay, perhaps we are living in a simulation, but perhaps there's something beyond the simulation. That when we die, that there is some sort of awakening from the simulation into whatever true reality there is. That would be my preference in trying to look at this idea and live with this kind of a thought. Because for me, it's far more comfortable. For others, it may not be so much. The truth is that if this test is legitimate, then perhaps we can get some sort of truth. If it's not, then we'll never really know. We'll never truly know whether or not we live in a simulation or not. At that point, we're left with the ideas that we have had for centuries of an idea of what is life, what isn't life, and the way that we're evolving in terms of understanding medical knowledge. All these ideas that are being evolved in this simulation may or may not be true if it's a simulation. Perhaps these are ideas that are being imparted to us by our intelligent designer, our programmer, God, whatever. That this idea that this reality that we see, who knows? There's no way to prove otherwise. If this test ends up being true, if this test can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt whether or not and is fundamentally sound. As I said, I'm not a physicist. I've made a run a few times at trying to understand some of it, but I'm not a master of it. But what I can say is that there are significant ramifications for many of us if we found out the truth about the kind of reality that we live in, or lack thereof, a reality that we believe that we live in. At any rate, take some time to absorb some of this in and think to yourself, what do you think? I mean, is life just a simulation? And when we die, we wake up into some other sense of reality? No, for many, I think it's an overwhelming yes, especially those who believe in God and have an afterlife idea. There are others who would see this as a simulation and believe that, well, yeah, because none of this matters. There's nothing else beyond this. This idea is one that can appeal to many different people. So take some time over the next few days and kind of ask yourself, what do you think? I'd love to get some feedback from people and let me know if you think we're living in a simulation or not. So it's an amazing thing. And like I said, I could spend another half an hour, 2 hours, 3, 5, 10 hours on this kind of topic. There's so much information, but that's all that I have for you today. And I plan, as scheduled, to be back next Friday. So hopefully, barring any kind of setbacks, I should be back next Friday with a whole other episode. Until then, thanks for listening.